Ah, well, this was a very sudden stream, so I expect I'll mostly be talking to myself because I gave pretty much zero warning for it. Let's connect. Where is it? All right. So I'll wait a few minutes and drink a bit of my disease beer. Because it's kind of an annoying, a little bit of an annoying stream I find myself forced to do. It's a little bit annoying because it's correcting one of the old wives' tales, or shall we just call it for what it is, outrageous lies that some of the orthobros or orthodogs, depends how you prefer to call them, go on and on whining and whining and whining about the Fourth Crusade. Why? The too long did not read version is 1054. The Eastern Orthodox, inverted commas, schismatics, schism from Christianity as a result of the arrogance of their emperor and 3 bishops who have no authority to schism or to excommunicate the emperor. He excommunicates them, they excommunicate him. But they have no authority to do so because, first of all, they're acting on their own. Secondly, the Pope is dead at this point in time. They just didn't know it. So they have zero authority. They've got zero, jurisdiction. When a Pope dies, and in the interregnum before the next Pope is elected, the bishops have got zero authority. They've got zero jurisdiction. All they can do is just perform sacraments just like any other priest. So the mutual excommunication was invalid. So much so that the next Pope that came up, and I forget the name of the Pope, tried to make amends. Now, what prompted all this, by the way, was Vox's post on an interview, did a very interesting interview with this guy, John Julius Norwich, which he did an interview with him, I think, in 2011. The man's passed on now. And I don't wish to talk ill of the dead, especially of John Julius Norwich. He's a very entertaining writer. But by his own admission, even in an interview with Vox, he is certainly not a scholar or an expert. He does write very entertainingly, yes, he does. But he's obviously biased. He is no scholar. In this book here, The Popes, he goes on about what bad guys the Crusaders were to, beat up the poor innocent Muslims. Quite a statement. I was trying to find the exact page, but it will take me a while to find it. I read this book a while ago, and I've bookmarked some things, but as you can see, it's a pretty well-lived book. I used to take this to work with me and read on the train, and I don't know, I'd have to find it. Eventually, when I do, I'm sure I'll make, here's something about Muslims. There'll be a small price to pay for the peaceful relation between Christian and Islam for Frederick's own immediate departure. But, oh yeah, and he also goes on and on about basically how Saladin was really kind of a cool guy, and there's 12, Alexander, oh wait, we might actually find this quite quickly because it goes by date. So here we go. Pope into his own hands. Malaria. Okay, that's 10. Schism. Here we are. Right, so let's just give you a little bit of background, and this is from the man himself, right? So, fighting indiscriminately for the highest bidder, they soon began to extract payment in the land for the services. In 1030, Duke Sergius of Naples, grateful for their support, invested their leaders, Rainulf, with the country of Aversa. Thenforth their progress was fast. By 1050 they had effectively mopped up most of Apulia and Calabria, what is today known as Puglia and Calabria, and Pope Leo, seeing an ever-growing threat along his southern border, proclaimed a holy war and raised an army against them. It proved a great mistake. He's talking here about the Normans. The Normans may have been difficult neighbors, but they were by no means heretics, and had always protested their loyalty to the Holy See. In the event of 17 June 1053, the papal army was soundly beaten on the field of Civitate. The Byzantine army never turned up, to the fury of the papalists, who inevitably felt betrayed, and the Pope himself was taken prisoner. His captors treated him with slightly overdone respect, and 9 months later, after they had got what they wanted, confirmation of their conquests and the lifting of their sentence of excommunication, they bore him back in state to Rome. But Leo never recovered from his humiliation and died only a month later. The Pope's second misfortune, greater by far than the first, was that he was called upon to preside, although posthumously, over the great schism between the Eastern and the Western churches. The two had been growing apart for centuries. Their slow but steady estrangement was in essence a reflection of the old rivalry between Latin and Greek, Rome and Byzantium. The Roman pontificate was rapidly extending its effective authority across Europe, and as its power grew, so too did its ambition and arrogance, tendencies that were viewed in Constantinople with resentment and not a little anxiety. There was also a fundamental difference in the approach of the two churches to Christianity itself. The Byzantine, for whom their emperor was equal of the apostles, believed that matters of doctrine could be settled only by the Holy Ghost speaking through an ecumenical council. They were accordingly scandalized by the presumption of the Pope, who was, in their view, merely primus inter pares among the patriarchs. Primus inter pares means first among equals. In formulating dogma and claiming both spiritual and temporal supremacy, while to the legalistic and disciplined minds of Rome, the old Greek love of discussion and theological speculation was always repugnant and occasionally shocking. Already 2 centuries before, matters had very nearly come to a head over Photius and the Filioque. Fortunately, after the death of Pope Nicholas I, and thanks to the goodwill of his successor and of Photius himself, friendly relations had been outwardly restored, but the basic problems remained unsolved. The Filioque continued to gain adherents in the West, and the emperor maintained his claim to rule as God vice-regent on earth. It was only a matter of time before the quarrel broke again. So, the Easterns, first of all, don't know how to read, because the Filioque, the thing that, the Holy Ghost only proceeds from God, that's what the Easterners believe, is absolute nonsense. It's in the New Testament, read it. It pretty much says that it proceeds from both. You'd have to be sort of retarded to not really know that, or interpret it some other way. It's, the beginnings of Protestantism, really. And also that the emperor is God's vice-regent. Well, no, he's not. He's not even an ordained priest. He's just an emperor. So, in the West, in Rome, as they understood it, that the emperor, the king, whatever, he was a lay person. He was not any kind of clergy. And the only power that he had was as the arm of force of the church. So the church militant was presided over by the clergy, by the Pope and his bishops and so on. But, hello, Sunny Breaks. I think I might remember you. I'm terrible with names, but I have this, I think you had a beard, if I remember right. Anyway, so the quarrel broke out that it did so at this moment might be blamed partially on Pope Leo, but was very largely the fault of the Patriarch of Constantinople, Michael Cerularius. He was as unlike his distant predecessor Photius as can possibly be imagined. Whereas the latter had been a man of intelligence and charm, as well as the greater scholar of his day, Cerularius was a narrow-minded bigot. Already before Civitate he had fired his first salvo, learning that the Normans, with papal approval, were enforcing Latin customs, in particular the use of unleavened bread for sacraments, on the Greek churches of the southern Italy. He had immediately ordered the Latin communities of Constantinople to adopt Greek usage, and when they objected, he had closed them down. There had followed a bitter correspondence in which the Patriarch condemned certain Roman practices as sinful and Judaistic, while the Pope suggested, without a shred of justification, that the Patriarch's election had been uncanonical. To carry the papal letters to Constantinople, Leo, who was probably already dying, unwisely selected the three most rabidly anti-Greek churchmen in his curia: his principal secretary, Cardinal Humbert of Montemur, who, in the events that followed, was to prove not a jot less bigoted and waspish than the Patriarch himself, Cardinal Frederick of Lorraine, and Archbishop Peter of Amalfi, both of whom had fought with him at Civitate and bore a bitter grudge against the Byzantines for having let them down. From the moment of their arrival at Constantinople, everything went wrong. The Emperor Constantine IX received them graciously enough, but Cerularius categorically refused to recognize their authority. Then came the news that Pope Leo had died in Rome. Humbert and his colleagues had been Leo's personal representatives. His death consequently deprived them of all official standing. Their proper course in the circumstances would have been to return at once to Rome. Instead, they remained in Constantinople, apparently unconcerned, growing more arrogant and high-handed with every day that passed. When a certain monk of the monastery of the Stadium answered a papal criticism in polite and respectful language, Humbert replied with a stream of hysterical invectives, describing the writer as a pestiferous pimp and a disciple of the malignant Mahomet, suggesting that he must have emerged from a theatre of brothel rather than a monastery, surely confirming the average Byzantine in his opinion that the Church of Rome now consisted of little more than a bunch of crude barbarians with whom no argument, let alone agreement, could ever be possible. At least, as Cerularius knew he would, Humbert lost the last shreds of his patience. At 3 o'clock on the afternoon of Saturday, 16th July, 1054, in the presence of all the clergy assembled for the Eucharist, the three ex-legates of Rome, 2 cardinals, and an archbishop, all in their full canonicals, strode into the great church of St. Sophia, the Holy Wisdom, and up to the high altar on which they formally laid their solemn bull of excommunication. This done, they turned on their heels and marched from the building, pausing only to shake the dust symbolically from their feet. 2 days later, they left for Rome. It was only when the bull had been publicly burned and the legates themselves formally anathematized that peace returned. Even if we ignore the fact that the legates were without any papal authority and that the bull itself was consequently invalid by every standard of canon law, it remained an astonishing production. Few important documents, in the words of Sir Stephen Runciman, have been so full of demonstrable error. Now, Stephen Runciman is a guy that this man says, oh, he was a great historian. No, he wasn't, and I'll prove that to you in a little bit. In the words of Steve Runciman, have been so full of demonstrable errors, yet such was the sequence of events at Constantinople in the summer of 1054 that it resulted in the lasting separation of the Eastern and Western churches. It is an unedifying story because, however inevitable the breach may have been, the events themselves should never, and need never, have occurred. More strength of will on the part of the dying Pope, less bigotry on the part of the narrow-minded Patriarch or the pig-headed Cardinal, and the situation could have been saved. The initial crisis arose in southern Italy, the one crucial area in which a political understanding between Rome and Constantinople was most vitally necessary. The fatal blow was struck by the disempowered legates of a dead pope representing a headless church, since the new pontiff had not yet been elected, and using an instrument at once uncanonical and inaccurate. Both the Latin and the Greek excommunications were directed personally at the offending dignitaries rather than at the churches for which they stood. Both could later have been rescinded, and neither was at the time recognized as introducing a permanent schism. Technically, indeed, they did not do so, since twice in succeeding centuries, in the 13th at Lyons and in the 15th at Florence, very important 15th Ecumenical Council, that one, was the Eastern Church to be compelled for political reason to acknowledge the supremacy of Rome. So, twice after the schism, let this be clear, at two different ecumenical councils, the Pope was once again accepted by all to be the supreme leader of the church, as he was for the first 1054 years anyways. But though a temporary bandage may cover an open wound, it cannot heal it, and despite the balm applied in 1965 by the Second Vatican Council, no, that wasn't a balm, the Second Vatican Council was an absolute routing of the original church and usurpation by the Satanists that represent the Bergoglian, Roncallian nonsense. So he's blaming, the fact that these guys sort of excommunicated each other, didn't really have the authority to do so, and certainly not for the whole church. But he goes on about the next pope, and there were various rapprochements from the Romans, really. Now let me tell you why Stephen Runciman was talking a lot of nonsense. And all this was brought about because of the whining, the incessant whining of the traitorous backstabbers that are the Eastern Orthodox. I do need to drink a commoner's beverage when I'm, rolling around in the sewers here trying to educate peasants about the proper place of the so-called Orthodox in the scheme of historical things. Let me now switch to an actual historian who does his work, God's Battalions, by Rodney Stark. And this is a small book, which is really just an introductory piece. But you see, the thing I like about Rodney Stark is, first of all, he's not a Catholic. He's a Baptist, and yet he's an honest man. He has demonstrated this in a number of ways. He's written a book called Bearing False Witness and other books, basically explaining how the lies about the Catholic Church are lies created by Protestants, Orthodox, etc., etc. So read that book if you think that the Catholics are some pagan cult that didn't allow people to read the Bible. It's absolute nonsense. And then he also corrected himself, because he did the error in the past. In some of his historical books, he talks about this, where he took another historian's word for something without double checking it himself from primary sources. And then years later, more than 20 years later, he realized, well, actually, let me do this properly. And he went to check, and he was like, what? This guy just lied. And he said this in one of his books. He just pointed it out. He said, amongst the crappy historians that did a shoddy job of this, I was one of them, because I copied one of the other guys. But now, and he gives you the reference and so on. Now, this book is really just an introduction to the Crusades, and I suggest you read this first before you read a brilliant book called The Crusades by Harold Lamb, written in 1930 by a guy who was a freak of nature, and he went to study from the original documents in museums and so on. He could speak Arabic and so on. Anyway, let me read you about and another thing, Mr. Norwich here, that goes on about the poor Muslims somewhere in here, and the vicious Catholics, somehow skips over the fact that the Muslims massacred and enslaved Christians for 400 years before the First Crusade. And the First Crusade was really just the first response, the one reply. And what happened in the First Crusade? Read this book for the details, right? Because, so, the Byzantines, backstabbing, wheeling and dealing. Why do you think the word Byzantine means backstabbing, wheeling and dealing, and underhanded, and, complicated, and twisty and turny? There's a reason why that word is used for this sort of thing. Because that's what they do. That's what they did. They are half Eastern, half, Muslim. They're half Turkish, all mixed up in that whole area. and wheeling and dealing. You know, even in Italy, not too long ago, and still now in some little villages like the one where I'm in, you walk into a place and you ask the guy, how much? And he gives you a price. And if you dare to sort of say, oh, give me like 5 off, you know, it's more acceptable now. But like when I was a kid, you didn't go into a guy's shop and say, oh, how much for that? And he gave you a price. You just like, okay, either pay it or you walk out. For you to offer a lower price would be an absolute insult, because it would be implying that the man was trying to rip you off. Now, you try and do that anywhere in the whole of Egypt, Libya, Algeria, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, any one of those places where Muslims live. And if you just pay them the first price, you're an idiot. You go in and you sort of say, well, how much is it? 10, I'll give you 2. No, I'll give you 8. Oh, have some tea. No, I'll give you 2.5. No, okay, 7. No, 3. No, and you stay there for half an hour and you're bargaining about a potato. This is not a potato. This is a Corona beer. The Byzantines are part of that culture. So, First Crusade comes in 1095. When did the split happen? We just read it. 1054. So, some 50 years later, almost, 40 years later, the Byzantines are like, the Muslims are killing us. Come help, come help. So what did the Catholics do? Oh, okay, let's go help these gay guys who can't handle their own shit. So they send the Crusades over, and before they start anything, the emperor there says, oh, you have to swear allegiance to me. You can't take any of the land. You can't take any of the treasure. You got to give everything back to me once you've killed all the Muslims. And most of the Crusaders do make this oath, except one guy, Marco. Marco is also known as Bohemond. He's one of the princes, and he figures he clocks this emperor like from the get-go. And he's kind of like, yeah, well, you know what, I'm just kind of busy. I'm going to go do my thing, and we'll see how you treat us. Now, the Crusaders win the fights against the Muslims. They take over the cities back. They return the cities back to the Orthodox. And what do the Orthodox do? Who, by the way, the Orthodox promised armies, soldiers to help, food, water, the logistics of like, hey, you guys are the army, you guys are the fighters, but we'll provide you food, water, and horses and whatever. Nope. Not only do they not provide that stuff, but at various points, and this didn't happen once or twice, it happened a lot. They got together with the Muslims to get the Crusaders ambushed, sometimes just by Muslims, and later also by the soldiers of the Byzantines, together with the Muslims, to try and kill the very guys who came to save them. At that point, people like Bohemond went, you know what? After I've fought all my way to Antioch, and we've had no water for 3 days, our horses died because of no water, yeah, I'm just going to bribe one of the guards, take over Antioch, and then the next day, we're surrounded by like thousands of Muslims that we just got in here with like a few hundred knights, and our surviving wives and sons that didn't die from dehydration, pestilence and whatever. But one of the priests has a dream about the spear of Longinus being under one of the altars. They dig under the altar. Sure enough, the spear of Longinus appears to be there. You can't lose a war with the spear of Longinus. So although there's like tens of thousands of Muslims out there just outside of Antioch, what do the Crusaders do? They come out of the gates charging, and they win. They kick ass in like fights that were outnumbered like over 100 to 1 and shit like that. So that's who the Crusaders were. And they got betrayed viciously in the First Crusade. But then they had a Second Crusade because, hey, brother Christians, right? Even though you're schismatics who can't read the Bible and, Second Crusade happens. What did the Byzantines do? Betray the Catholics again. Say that they're going to fund them with food and that, and then when they're like surrounded by Muslims, well, where's our reinforcements? Where's our food? Where's the water? Nope, not coming. They have a Third Crusade. What do you think happens in the Third Crusade? You think the Byzantines are like cool this time? Nope. Backstab them again. Now we have the Fourth Crusade. And here, let me take you to page 211 of this book by this man. There we go, Rodney Stark, an honest historian. Let's read together a little bit what happened. Because the Fourth Crusade culminated in Crusaders sacking Constantinople, it has long served as a primary proof, in inverted commas, that the Crusades were a shameful episode that the Crusades were a shameful episode in the greedy history of the West. Only 6 years after the world had learned of the Nazi death camps and the extent of the Holocaust, the distinguished Cambridge historian Stephen Runciman. Do we remember Runciman? This guy over here that this guy idolizes and says, oh, he was a great historian, yeah? Oh, this is another book by Norwich, John Julius Norwich. And in Fox's thing, he goes on about, oh, how Runciman was a brilliant historian, a true student. Was he now? Let's check this out. Only 6 years after the world had learned of the Nazi death camps and the extent of the Holocaust, the distinguished Cambridge historian Stephen Runciman could write, there was never a greater crime against humanity than the Fourth Crusade. It's quite a statement, especially when you consider the Soviet Union, Pol Pot, yeah, the Muslims throughout the Crusades and before the Crusades, yeah. Did you know that the Muslims enslaved over 1 million Christians? Men, women, and children? Yeah. And that's not counting the fact that they killed most of the men and castrated them when they didn't kill them. Anyway, let's continue. Runciman certainly knew that many other cities of this era not only had been sacked, but had had their populations massacred to the last resident, compared with probably fewer than 2,000 deaths during the Crusades' sack of Constantinople, a city of about 150,000 people. So why this uniquely extreme condemnation? Ah, but the others were just dreary medieval cities. This was the great city, filled with the works of art that had survived from ancient Greece and with the masterpieces of its own exquisite craftsmen. And he's quoting here Runciman. Indeed, admiration for the sophisticated city is a standard theme in the outrage against the Fourth Crusade. As Speros Vrionis put it, the Latin soldiery subjected the greatest city in Europe to an indescribable sack. Constantinople had become a veritable museum of ancient and Byzantine art. Or, in the words of Will Durant, the Crusaders, and he's quoting now again, now in Easter week subjected the rich city to such spoliation as Rome had never suffered from Vandals or Goths. That's a ridiculous statement. By the way, I know that. I don't need to be a historian to know that. There even is a whole school of scholars who, in addition to lamenting the damage to the city, claimed that the Fourth Crusade was from the start nothing but a diabolical Venetian plot to eliminate Byzantine commercial competition. Blaming my ancestors. I laugh in your face. Let us continue reading. These bitter condemnations of the Fourth Crusade led Pope John Paul II, I have to correct Mr. Stark here, led the fake anti-Pope Freemason Wojtyła, who shall never be named John Paul II, in 2001 to apologize to the Greek Orthodox Church. It is tragic that the assailants who set out to secure free access for Christians in the Holy Land turned against their brothers in their faith. They were Latin Christians fills Catholics with deep regret. No, it fucking doesn't. And you're not a Catholic, so you had no right to speak on our behalf. I'm a Catholic and I regret nothing. Nothing here about the prior sacks of the city by the Byzantine themselves during political coups. In 1081, Alexius Comnenus allowed his foreign mercenaries to plunder the capital for 3 days. These are their own guys, doing their own thing. Nor is there a word to acknowledge the centuries of Orthodox brutalities against Latin Christians. In 1182, the emperor incited mobs to attack all western residents of Constantinople, during which thousands, including women, children, and the aged, were massacred. Many more deaths are thought to have occurred during the city's sack by the Crusaders. Not a word about the instance of Byzantine treachery that occurred during each of the first 3 Crusades, and that cost tens of thousands of Crusaders their lives. This wasn't just, a few guys died. Surely it is not surprising that these many acts of betrayal built up substantial animosity towards Byzantium. Then, in 1204, Those who had journeyed east as members of the Fourth Crusade also were deceived by a Byzantine emperor who, after the Crusades helped restore him to the throne, broke his glittering promises and launched fireships against the Crusader fleet. He promised them gold and riches and lands. He had done all this. I've read this in other history books, by the way. Meanwhile, the Latin residents of Constantinople fled the city in fear of their lives, recalling the massacre of 1182, and took refuge in the Crusader camp. This left the Crusaders without food or money, stranded on a hostile shore. That's when they attacked Constantinople. Now for the details. Pope Innocent's initial call for the new crusade was ignored. The Germans were on the outs with Rome, while the French and English were at war again. But just as the lethargic response to the Second Crusade was overcome by the efforts of Saint Bernard of Clairvaux, the Fourth Crusade was in response to the exertions of Fulk of Neuilly, a French cleric who accepted the Pope's request to preach a new crusade. The climax came during a tournament held by Count Thibault of Champagne in 1199. In the midst of the usual dangers and injuries involved in jousting matches, concerns of the Muslim occupation of Jerusalem arose, and Count Thibault ended up leading a group of his friends and relatives in taking the cross. From there, enthusiasm for a new crusade spread and planning began. Another thing most people don't know is the Crusades were really launched by a few rich families who then pretty much everybody else followed. And these guys weren't messing around. They sold castles, lands to raise the money to actually walk all the way there and fight with their wives and kids, which often died in the trip or during the wars. Once again, it was agreed that the Crusaders would go east by sea, but with a brilliant change in destination. Why fight peripheral battles in the Holy Land when Egypt was the aggressive power? So the original plan was to sail an irresistible army to the mouth of the Nile and put the enemy out of business for good. It made a great deal of sense. Of course, those organizing the new crusade had no navy, so they sent a delegation to Venice, then the primary naval power in the Mediterranean. The Venetians agreed to transport 4,500 knights with their horses, 9,000 squires, and 20,000 infantry, plus food for 9 months, and an escort of 50 fighting galleys for the price of 91,000 marks. To meet this enormous obligation, the Venetians had to suspend nearly all of their foreign trade and devote a year to the rapid construction of boats. So this was just a small sort of little promise. In June 1202, the promised Venetian fleet was ready. Unfortunately, the Crusaders had gathered only about a third of the force they had planned on, and since they were expecting to pay the Venetians by charging each Crusader for his passage, the shortfall in numbers left them about 31,000 marks short of the sum promised to the Venetians, even after the leaders borrowed all they could from moneylenders. People with small hats. At this point, the Doge of Venice offered a solution. Doge Enrico Dandolo was well into his 80s and blind, but he remained a brilliant, inspirational, and extremely energetic leader. What he proposed was that the Venetians join the crusade and that payment of the remaining balance be postponed. Not exactly, being a bad guy, as I think perhaps Vox believed in reading Mr. Norwich's account of things. In return, on their way to Egypt, the flotilla would stop and conquer Zara, or Zadar, a city on the Dalmatian coast across the Adriatic Sea from Venice, which had recently rebelled against Venetian rule. So, on October the 1st, 1202, the Crusader fleet of more than 200 ships, including 60 war galleys, left Venice with about 15,000 fighting men and thousands of horses aboard, bound for Zara. In late November, Zara surrendered without resistance, and soon thereafter the Crusader fleet sailed on south to Corfu to winter. At this point, an exiled Byzantine prince, Alexius, the son of deposed Emperor Isaac II, and himself a claimant to the throne, made the Crusaders a remarkable proposal, a Byzantine proposal, an Eastern proposal, in short, a lie. In return for their aid in recovering the throne, Alexius would pay them 200,000 silver marks, supply all provisions for their expedition against Egypt, reinforce the expedition with 10,000 Byzantine troops, submit the Greek church to Rome, and then permanently station 500 knights to augment the forces of the Christian kingdom in the Holy Land. Not only was the offer of immense immediate benefit, perhaps more important, he proposed a longed-for solution to the problem of sustaining the kingdoms. It always had been obvious that the kingdoms were in permanent jeopardy so long as the security was dependent on Europe. And by the kingdoms he means the kingdoms in the Outre-mer that the Catholic Crusaders secured, including Jerusalem and so on. And they lost Jerusalem in the Second Crusade and so on. But, they still kept, after 200 years pretty much, they still had lands there, and they kept the kingdoms. So, but if the primary responsibility could be shifted to Byzantium, help would be much closer and far more dependable, especially if threats from Egypt were eliminated, which was the whole point of this crusade. And so the fleet rounded Greece and set sail for Constantinople. On July 5th, 1203, the Crusader fleet landed at Galata, across from Constantinople, and the Venetians broke the chain blocking the entrance to the Golden Horn and then sailed into the city's harbor. The current Byzantine emperor had so utterly neglected Constantinople's defense that the few rotting galleys that the Greeks could send against the Venetians were sunk in moments. Venetians at sea, don't mess with them. Then on July 17th came attack on the city, with the blind old doge waving the banner of St. Mark in the lead galley and shouting at his forces, and shouting at his forces. So just keep in mind, the doge is 80-something years old. He's right there, okay? He's fighting with his men. Some Venetians landed. When his forces seemed hesitant to scale the walls, the doge demanded to be set ashore, and as Dandolo had calculated, the men were shamed by the old man's bravery. They could not abandon the venerable leader and rushed to join him. The walls were scaled, gates were forced, and the Venetians occupied a portion of the city. Meanwhile, the Crusader army marched towards the city from the other side. When the Greeks marched out, a huge army to confront them, the Crusaders formed solid ranks and awaited their attack. None came. The Greeks decided to withdraw instead. That night the emperor deserted, whereupon the Byzantines opened the remaining city gates and accepted Alexius IV as their new emperor. In response, the Crusaders marched out of the city and camped across the Golden Horn at Pera. So as a mark of respect, they didn't keep their soldiers in Constantinople after they put on the throne the guy who said, promised all these things to them. Let's keep this in mind. They're still acting like proper good Catholic boys. At first things went well. Although he found little money in the treasury, Alexius IV began to pay installments on his debt of 200,000 marks, but he faced unflinching hostility from his subjects. The priests and upper classes hated Latins and held them in contempt. As tensions grew, the remaining resident Latins, to escape what seemed to be an impending massacre, remember they just had one like 20 years earlier, took their families and as much as they could of their property and crossed the harbor to join the Crusaders, who had left Constantinople to show that they were respectfully not occupying the city with armed soldiers. Shortly thereafter, Emperor Alexius shifted with the political wind and ceased making payments on his debt. War became imminent. Twice the Greeks sent fire ships against the Venetian fleet. The formula for Greek fire seems already to have been lost. The attacks failed. Meanwhile, inside the city, a palace coup placed another member of the royal family known as Morzopoulos, because he had bushy eyebrows, that met on the throne. He strangled Alexius IV with a bowstring and murdered other possible royal claimants. The new emperor immediately began to strengthen the defenses and sent troops to cut off all supplies to the Crusaders. As the esteemed French historian Jean Richard explained, the situation of the Crusaders became impossible. They were without food or money, far from the theater of operations that they wished to reach, Egypt. The Venetians were no better placed. They too had counted on the subsidies promised by Alexius IV. So the leaders gathered and evaluated the possibilities. Their diversion to put a new emperor favorable to the West on the Byzantine throne had been costly in time, money, and lives. Whatever the state of the emperor's treasury, Constantinople was bursting with immense wealth. They decided to sack the city. An agreement was reached as to how the booty would be gathered up and divided. Unfortunately, the group also decided to put the throne of Byzantium firmly in Western hands by instituting a new dynasty. The Crusader plan was to assault the walls and towers from flying bridges extended from the masts of the largest transport boats, meanwhile landing additional troops and cavalry on the shore. On April the 9th, the attack began and eventually failed, partly because an unfavorable wind forced the fleet offshore. On April 12th, with a strong wind at their back, the Venetians were able to grapple their flying bridges to some of the towers. Crusaders drove the defenders from that section of the wall, and some descended and broke down the gates from the inside. Mounted knights rode into the city. By nightfall, the Crusaders held a section of the city several hundred yards in from the walls. They slept in their ranks, expecting fierce resistance in the morning. Instead, Mortzaphilus fled during the night, typically of the Byzantines. And all resistance collapsed. Most of the upper classes had already fled. For 3 days, the Crusaders sacked the city. Most accounts stress rape and murder rather than the looting. No doubt such brutalities occurred, but the estimated death rate was low, as noted, while the booty was immense. To speak of sacking a city is in reference to soldiers stuffing sacks full of valuables. The commanders ordered that all booty be turned in for division. Of course, much was held out, especially small valuables such as jewels. Even so, what was turned in eventually yielded 400,000 marks, as well as 10,000 suits of armor. So, you don't pay up? Well, you pay double. That is a long-standing Venetian trait which my entire family lives by. With the city at their feet, the Europeans went ahead with their plans for a new dynasty. Thus, Baldwin of Flanders was installed as the new emperor of Byzantium. As might have been expected, his successful rule required the presence and backing of a Western army. When they placed Baldwin on the throne, the Crusaders had pledged to remain to defend him until 1205. All plans for an attack on Egypt had been discarded, and when that date was reached, the Fourth Crusade was officially ended, and about 7,000 fighting men boarded Venetian ships and sailed home. Without their backing, huge hunks of the empire soon broke away, and by 1225 there was little left under Western rule, although a Western emperor held on in Constantinople until 1261. So, the treachery of the Byzantines ended the possibility of Christianity taking back what used to be Christian lands from the Muslims. And Mr. Norwich, who is all on the side of the Muslims throughout his Pope's book, was absolutely not a scholar or a student. And his, bias towards the Byzantines, because he got enamored with them for whatever reason, I don't want to cast aspersions, so I'll keep my thoughts to myself about why he might have enjoyed Byzantium more than the Latins, although he lived in Venice and traveled there for a long time. I don't know. I don't know why his research was that poor, but it was. So no, the Fourth Crusade was absolutely warranted. The sacking of Constantinople was absolutely warranted. And as I have said, and I will continue to say till my dying breath, if I had been one of the princes in the First Crusade, I would have done my level-headed best, if not to raise Constantinople to the ground, certainly to put the head of the emperor on a pike and put it on the walls. Now, let's see what you guys are saying here. Still 9 of you. Pretty impressed, given I give you no warning. Hello, Slanty Chauffeur, Sonny Breaks, hi again. Yes, I think I do remember Sonny. Wally Ram says, good evening. Nothing more encouraging than seeing an old man that still has fire in his heart. Yes, Dondolo and Jean Perizot de Valette are my go-to guys for when I'm thinking about my old age. Imagine scaling a wall along a rope bridge while in armor, from the mast of a ship to the tower of a castle that you're trying to take over. Yeah, that's pretty impressive stuff, man. So, yeah, I just wanted to put the lie. I'm so tired of the Eastern Orthodox. You guys, you beat us up. Yeah, we did, because you deserved it. You conniving, thieving, lying, scummy, cheating backstabbers. That's all there is to it. And that's why, and keep in mind also, that what did the Orthodox, did they spread the gospel? No. Who was getting crucified in Japan on the other side of the world? It wasn't the Orthodox, it wasn't the Greek Orthodox and Russian Orthodox, no. It was Catholics. So, there you go. And as I wrote in my recent long post, Protestantism is not Christianity. Protestantism is to Christianity, you know, what, I don't know, what I made an analogy in the long blog post I did about the root of all evil. But it isn't, and neither's Orthodox, so-called Orthodoxy. Christopher Collins says, thank you for the reading and explanations. You're most welcome. Now don't forget it, and make sure you tell all your so-called Orthodox friends, like, oh, we got beards, and we're cool guys. We're protecting the West. No, you're not. No, you never did. You know, I bought into that sort of orthodoxy for a very brief period of time. After my road to Damascus moment, I think the most accurate thing you could say about my religious belief system was that I went from a somewhat Zen agnostic, part Shintoist, you know, to essentially a deist for a very brief period of time, because all I knew was that God existed and God is love, and that was my experience, very subjective experience, but was very objective for me. From my perspective, it was extremely objective. And, you know, I had plenty of objective confirmations of something that I can't prove to anybody else, but absolutely was true for me. And so I went from sort of Zen agnostic to like, oh, wow, God actually exists, and he gives a crap about me personally, and everything I thought was completely wrong. And okay, what kind of God? Well, it sounds like a Christian God. So I started to, you know, read the Bible, and which I'd read parts of the Bible before, and I still haven't read the whole Bible, but I've read quite a bit more now than I had then. And passages that I'd read before suddenly opened up to me and made a lot of sense. So I was like, okay, then this Christian God seems to fit exactly, you know, the things they're saying in here and in the Bible about God seems to fit exactly what I experienced, which, by the way, seems to be almost exact opposite of what they used to tell me in so-called Catholic Church when I was a kid. You know, what the hell were those guys talking about? You know, the Bible is one of the most revolutionary books that was ever written, and Jesus was an absolute rebel. And it's like, man, why didn't they tell me this stuff? You know, the stuff that they told me doesn't sort of really fit. And of course it didn't, because I was born in '69, which means that I was already well into the Novus Orco fake church. Yes, they're called Novus Orco, as in orcs. Not Ordo, there is no order, it's chaos, because they're chaotic evil, like orcs. It was the fake church. I was being educated by the fake church, the Satanist Freemasons, call them what you like. So of course I rejected it. And of course does anybody with a shred of decency, you know, or dignity, or honor, or justice, or, you know, any of the virtues of Catholicism, you would automatically reject the fake Catholicism, which I did for many years. And I just thought, well, could anybody believe in that nonsense? But then I started to educate myself, and I thought, well, you know, I was training with the Russians. I was, you know, pretty heavily into the Russian system, and I was like, well, you know, the thing is, these guys are pretty cool. They're pretty hardcore. They believe, they go to church, they stand in church, they don't sit down like weak pussies, and it seems like pretty hardcore. I even went to talk to a Russian Orthodox priest who was like, yeah, you know, I can't help you. You're not Orthodox, so kind of fuck off. And I was like, okay. And then so I thought, well, you know, let me educate myself, because the Catholic thing always made sense. It made a lot of sense. So when I started to read old Catholic books and the patriarchs and the stuff. But the thing is like, man, but how can the Catholics be right? I mean, look at all the fucking child molesting scum, and, you know, this Pope is like protecting pedophiles. That can't be right. That can't be God's guy, you know? So I kept reading, and it's like, and basically I came to this conclusion that the Orthodox, so-called Orthodox, as soon as things got a little bit difficult, a little bit intellectual, where you had to think a little bit further, it's a mystery. Well, the Catholics were like, okay, well, it's a mystery, but let's just think about this logically. What would this mean? you know, there's this passage in the Bible that says this, it's in this context, it's said by this guy, and then there's this other passage which sort of reflects it and, you know, comments on it. And the Catholics just used reason and logic to work stuff out. So I thought, you know, these guys make more sense to me. Now, it doesn't mean that Catholicism doesn't have mysteries. They do. You know, the Trinity is considered a mystery. There's a bunch of mysteries in Catholic belief system, but nowhere near as many as the Orthodox. The Orthodox are kind of like, you think too much. To which my response has always been, nope, it's not me that thinks too much. It's you that can't think enough. Unable to. Incapable of it. So it's a fake religion, you know, their thing. I mean, the Protestants were out almost immediately because, you know, once you start reading the history of the church, the idea that like for 1,500 years everybody was wrong until some German drunk came along, who was probably Jewish, by the way, and was probably a hitman to do what exactly he did, who liked to bang nuns. That guy fixed the Bible, and after that, after he changed it, he said, no one should change anything in the Bible. You know, the Bible is the Word of God. But he changed it first, you know, and he had already, and the one he picked had been changed by the Pharisees for 700 years. And then which version of this Bible became the best? Oh, the one that got commissioned by the gay king, the King James, yeah, the Freemasonic Bible, also known as the Freemasonic Bible, King James Version, yeah, 33,000 errors of translation in it, yeah, and all these translation errors sort of like to change things, kind of like, you know, the importance of Mary or Jesus, or, you know, even the commandments, like they said don't kill, they changed it to don't kill. No, the commandment is do not murder, which is quite different from do not kill. Some of my southerner friends of Jebediah Lovemore kind of way would say, in the south of the United States, some people just need killing. And I kind of agree with that. Some people do. Because keep in mind that the Catholics believe in the death sentence, always have, always will. Why? Well, because the death sentence for certain crimes is absolutely just. Rape a little kid, kill a little kid, yeah, you die. That's Catholic thought. I'm all for it. And I know Woolly Ram is itching to tell us some stuff, so you type away, my friend. I will read all your comments. Saw a video a few days ago explaining the origin of prosperity gospel. Calvinist Puritans needed an external proof that they are predestined, and being rich became that external sign. Isn't that just like the Calvinists? Oh, and the whole, you know, Israel is our greatest ally, the whole Judeo-Christianity thing came from the evangelicals, apparently from the Scofield Bible, which is a Bible that just like had a whole bunch of stuff taken out of it by a guy called Schofield, I imagine. And I don't want to say some nonsense. Was Schofield some, I don't know if he was one of the presidents of the United States or whatever. But anyway, who cares? America was a Freemasonic country created by Freemasons for Freemasonic purposes. If you read my long blog post, The Root of All Evil, and Woolly Ram here is making a pun, love of money is the root of all evil. Guess who said that? For Catholics, mysteries of the faith are an invitation to contemplation and meditation, not a stop sign. Exactly. Thank you, sir. So, I'm almost done with my disease beer, which I'm drinking like an animal, since I'm having to, you know, root around in the sewers for obvious things that people should know if they read books and knew anything about history. And I have a piece of lemon in it instead of lime. I know it's, might as well drink champagne out of the bottle. Anyway, that's my rant about the Fourth Crusade. And now when anybody tells you about the Catholics were the bad boys, you just send them to this video so that I can call them retards and liars and deceivers and ignorants and illiterates. You know, just as a generic sort of idea of who these people are. And now for something completely different. Please go ahead and shoot me whatever questions you have, comments, other topics. It's a free-for-all. There's only like about 8 of you. My lucky number. So go ahead and if you got anything to add, say, question, fire it away. I'm feeling, generous with my time today. Although I've gone nearly an hour, I didn't realize how much I probably quoted from these books. But, well, I'm going to wait here a few minutes while you guys think of something to ask me, while I go and look up what this guy says about the sack of Constantinople, if he even says it. Let's see. I'm sure he would have, because he was very much a pro-Byzantine type guy. Keep firing questions, guys. God's Battalion is one of the most inspiring and infuriating books I've ever read. Infuriating? Harris, if you think that's a good book, and if you've read that book, do yourself a favor, my friend. Pick up this book. Now, I'm not exaggerating when I say that I've read thousands of books. I really have. And I would put this, possibly this is my favorite book that I've ever read. And this particular copy, by the way, is funny because it's got notes in the, it's got little notes written in the margins by oh no, sorry, it's not this book that's got the note. I'm talking nonsense. But this book, The Crusades, also subtitled The Crusades of Iron Men and Saints, was written by this man. There you go, The Crusades, Iron Men and Saints by Harold Lamb. And this particular version was printed in, I think, yeah, it was copyrighted in 1930, but I think it was reprinted in the 1940s or what. Anyway, read this book, especially if you've read God's Battalions. And please tell me why you found it infuriating. I'm interested by that comment. God's Battalion should probably be read first because it gives you a generic historical context of the whole big picture thing. And then when you read the Crusades, you're like, oh my God, these guys are like, man, they're just read that book. Honestly, it is the most astonishing achievements were done about. There were truly heroic deeds done and heroic men. So let's just see. I'm just trying to see what he says about the yeah, look at this. This is how Norwich presents the whole sacking of Constantinople. So he goes on about, you know, that the fact that Alexius promised all that stuff. He says that, and then he says he would also heal the 150-year schism by submitting the Byzantine Church to the authority of Rome. So he says the same thing. He promised them all the gold and silver and blah, blah, blah. The invitation sounded tempting indeed and was accepted by both the Crusaders and the Venetians, who quickly forgot the differences. But it led in April 1204 to the most unspeakable of the many outrages in the whole hideous history of the Crusades, the brutal sacking and near destruction by men wearing the cross of Christ on their shoulders of Constantinople, capital of the Roman Empire and Christendom's most vital outpost in the East. As a result, a succession of Frankish thugs most of them hardly able to write their names, and none of them speaking a word of Greek, occupied the throne of the emperors for the next 57 years. Byzantium was to endure for almost 2 centuries more, but only as the palest shadow of what it once had been. No mention of all the betrayals that they took. And this is why I don't like this guy as a historical guy. He just writes fiction, essentially, based on history, and then he adds his own coloring to it. I have no idea why he was so pro Byzantium, but he was. And Harris, I'm curious about why he found the God's battalions infuriating. Wooly Ram, an old British historian, made a series of videos on the Crusades showing on a map all the attacks by Muslims before the First Crusade started. Yeah, I know, it was fucking a lot of them. I can't remember the number, but there's a lot. Pardon. What's that last book or author again? Lamb. Yes, Harold Lamb. I'll put it up here again. Harold Lamb, The Crusades. It's quite hard to get the physical book. I found this one on a second-hand bookshop, and I paid like £5 for it. It's still there. There's the price. It's marked down from $12.50. Paid $5 for it. I would have happily paid 50 or more. Yeah, let me just give you that page again. There we go. The Crusades, Iron Men and Saints by Harold Lamb. And then he also wrote a companion book about Islam, Fire and the Flame, something like that. Because this guy went to original documents from both sides. So he did an exemplary work. And if you're interested in, again, Catholics protecting Christendom, read also The Great Siege, 1565, by Ernle Bradford. It's a funny first name, E-R-N-L-E, Ernle Bradford. Harris, the betrayals and the bad luck they experienced. For instance, that general, I think he was German, easily won every battle, and one day his horse threw him in a river. They were crossing and drowned. Yeah. Harold Ram, thank you. Yeah, no, it's infuriating in that they came so close to like cleansing the world of evil pretty much. And but you know, imagine what an undertaking it was. And keep in mind, they did the First Crusade in 1095, and my ancestors actually were some of the people who were coming back from the Crusades in the 1200 something. I forget the exact date that my ancestors came back from there. And they came back from what is present-day Albania. They crossed over to Italy in a location where the Tower of Saint Susanna is, which is an ancient tower, the origins of which are sort of lost in the mists of time. But in that place, there was a feud going on between about 4, 5, or 6 families that had been going on for 200 years, been going on pretty much for the whole duration of the Crusades. Which, keep in mind, the Crusades lived overseas for 200 years, being maintained by money from the Catholics. Not one penny from the Orthodox that they went to save, and even when they left, they said, "Okay, look, we can't keep doing this for 200 years. We've like subsidized this. Now we'll give it back. We've built all these fortresses and castles that you can defend well. We'll give it to you. Just protect your own lands." They wouldn't do it, and that's why Islam took over that whole area. Anyway, when my ancestors came back, there was this feud that had been going on there for 200 years, and the details are not clear, but what happened is that my family, my ancestors, kicked the shit out of everybody and pacified the whole area there. And as a result, they were made into nobles by the King of Sicily, I think it was. And then there was 2 branches of my family, the Golden Branch, which they were the firstborn sons were marquis, and they still, to this day, not too long ago, some years ago, they gave the Tower of Saint Susanna as a sort of a place of historical significance to the state, I think, or it became a museum, something like that. And they're still in that region. The Philo, my original name was Philo. There you can see there we go. That's the emblem of my family name. The golden one, the golden branch of the family has got the same sort of symbol, but the line across the shield is yellow, and I can't remember if the shooting stars are silver or something. Or I can't remember. Anyway, they don't have the red, they've got like gold in there instead. My side of the family was the sort of silver side. You can see that in the helm, I think. Yeah, the helm is kind of got a silver thing, while the other guys have got a gold helm. And they basically lost the nobility because they went north and they were just explorers and sort of fighters and, you know, whatever. But they gained the nobility again in the War of Candia. They were Venetians. My family was Venetian for a long time, and they distinguished themselves in the War of Candia, and so they became patricians, which is the lowest rung of nobility, but still. And so my family's in history books and heraldic books, and they talk about some of the guys in tomes of like historical stuff in Italy going back 800 years or so. Holy Ram, the Crusades had such an impact on humanity's subconscious that even absolute atheists and Protestants used them as the icon of all things cool and martial. Yep. Mostly in role-playing games and video games, fantasy novels, etc. Yeah, look, my grandfather, my maternal grandfather was called Tancredi. I didn't know what that was about until I read a fiction book, which I'm trying to remember who the author was. Quite an old fiction book where the main guy is also called Tancredi. Tancredi, I found out when I read this book, was one. Yeah, I don't know. We seem to have a little jerk there. So anyway, Tancredi is in this book. I found he was one of the heroes of the Crusades, and my maternal grandfather, was named after that guy, which I didn't know that. Nobody told me that. Probably nobody knew. My own parents didn't know that, which I think is a terrible shame. Which is why I'm slowly gathering up all the bits about my family history. I'm going to put it in a book. I'd questioned my grandfather like for a couple of hours, and I'd written everything down, and then in one of my moves, my girlfriend threw out those notes. Couldn't find them again. I was away when the move happened, and my mother threw away my last letter from my grandfather, which he had a beautiful handwriting, and it was an awesome letter because I'd left home, I was fighting with my father, and I told him, I used to write to him, and he wrote me a beautiful letter saying, "You're leaving home on your own, you're 19, my father died when I was 19 and I left home, and don't worry, you're like a lion, you'll take over, you'll do whatever you need to do, I'm not worried about you, you know, you're a powerful dude, you're gonna do whatever." I was like, fuck, this is the coolest letter I've ever received, and I'd saved it and I kept it in a sort of safe spot, and I told my mother, like, you know, don't leave those things there, that's my papers. And of course, you know, I was traveling or moving away, whatever, come back, it's all fucking gone. So I learned my family is utterly, completely fucking unreliable when it comes to like looking after my shit. But such it is, man lives on in my mind. But I was upset about the fact that, you know, he'd given me the names of like all sorts of people, you know, his own dad and stuff that I can't find anymore, you know. And my dad and his sister don't really know that much. I guess they never gave a fuck. I don't know. I remember the birth dates of my own parents and so on, but apparently they're not so clear on that either. So kind of sad, really, you know, boomer generation. But there you go. But yes. Anyway, so that was a bit about the Crusades and the Fourth Crusade. You know, you guys want to talk about something else? Guns? I still don't have the 1911. Help a poor Catholic boy out. You know, I want to do one of those ads. Like, they keep shooting ads here on like YouTube and whatever, and like in Italian, and it's always the same guy. Now, it doesn't matter what it is: dying dogs, starving babies, Gaza, Israel. It's always the same dude, and he's always like, he's got this beard, dude, and he goes, "This has been the harshest winter for the Syrians for the last 50 years. And they're only living in tents and they're starving." Same guy, another video. "This has been the worst famine for, you know, the people of Ethiopia for the last 100 years. And we need your help. And I'm like, dude, you know. So I don't have a beard. But poor Catholic boy doesn't have a 1911 yet. Never owned one. You know, how could you just carry on living like this? Please give generously in your super chats. Yeah, I'm gonna get that little lemon bit. There we go. Well, that went the wrong way. Well, if I get to be able to speak again after inhaling some lemon, oh. Man, I don't know what's happened. It's like burned my vocal cords or something. But Woolly Ram asks an interesting question. Well, I now speak like a guy who's got emphysema. Emphysema and smokes 4 packs a day. Whoa. Has Catholicism managed to get a foothold in Africa before Vatican II? Sub-Saharan African, I mean. No, I don't think so. You gotta keep in mind that Roncalli, who was a Freemason and the first of the Satanists that usurped the throne, that happened in 1958. There wasn't a lot of stuff going on in Africa, you know, prior to 1958. So most of the expansion of the so-called Catholic Church in Africa happened after Vatican II. And all the Catholic churches that damn it, that I came across in Africa were all Vatican II fake Catholic churches. And for those of you who still don't know what the sedevacantist position is, I think I'm going to do another little blog post on that. Because it just needs to keep hammering that nail on the head. The deceivers on Social Galactic are like absolutely shameless. So, for example, that Catholic deacon that kept pretending to like to say that he had a point and that I wasn't right about sedevacantism, whatever. He got beaten down like a dog on everything dialectically for like more than 2 years in a row. And he would just come up. The same thing that had been proven to the point that like people on Social Galactic that had no dog in the fight were like, oh, looks like the Kurgan has beaten the crap out of you. He's given you like total references. He's proved this point any number of ways. And then just wait a few months and then they'd come up with the same thing that has been proven time and again. You know, they're absolutely shameless liars. And there is a trend that they have. Excuse me. A trend that they have in common with narcissists Freemasons and narcissists are the same sort of thing. They will lie outrageously to you, to your face. They'll say a lie that is so stupid, so unbelievably bold, that normal people can't help and think, but, well, there must be something to this. Surely they got... Jeez, I don't know what I've done with that little bit of lemon, but obviously was cursed. They just lie so outrageously that you can't... A normal human mind goes, well, if a guy tells me the sky is like purple with flashing green stars in it, it's so outrageous. It's gotta be real. There's gotta be something going on there. Maybe there's a meteor shower or something. And so you run out and the sky's just perfect blue. And you're like, but... And the guy will say, no, it's because I've got these, my eyes can see frequencies that yours can't pick up because I had this additional operation that helped me see better. And I can see the ultraviolet spectrum. They just come up with complete nonsense. And it's hard for a normal person to even imagine that someone would do that. These guys do that they do that like you and I breathe. It's amazing. They'll just make stuff up. The Canon 188.4 is so perfectly clear, You defect from the faith. No one needs to say anything. It literally says no one needs to say anything. The law itself convicts you and you lose your office. It's very, very clear. A child gets it. And it's also absolutely logical, right? It's like saying, well, you go on a basketball court with a golf club and start swinging it around. Well, guess what? You're not a basketball player and you get thrown out of the court. It's, again, no one needs to say anything. It's obvious. You're running in there with like studded shoes and a golf club swinging at the ball. You're not a basketball player. It's not like we need to have a judge now tell us is he really a basketball player? No, he's not. It's so obvious, but they do that, and normal people don't know how to deal with it. So it's sort of like it's almost like some kind of lizard brain, and a normal mammal is like, what is this thing trying to say? What is it trying to do? Magelmrek says, I think I came across the context of a city parish somewhere in Ethiopia. Can't remember the specifics. Yeah. Generally, I find that it isn't hard to push Sede through Catholicism amongst pro-Christian third worlders. In their minds, it's Christianity, therefore it must be good. Look, I'm not going to be relying on Africans to, reinstate the church. I've lived in Africa for over 25 years. So if you want some shock troops, once you've established the church, yeah, maybe. But, these guys they're not going to change. They're followers. They're not leaders. They're not going to create anything. Wooly Ram says, a big enough lie paralyzes my autism for a while. At least it used to. It never really did me. I immediately saw the guy as a liar, and the older I get, the less tolerant of it I get. As soon as somebody starts to do that shit, I just tear them a new asshole right away. I don't care where it is. Public, face-to-face, online, it's just like, yeah. Wooly, same here, but stupidity to my OCD. It's not stupidity, guys. It's like you're basically fundamentally honest. An honest person faced with somebody that says, oh, 2 + 2, yeah, that's 7. Sort of goes, wait, what? Yeah, it's 7. 2 + 2 is 7. Oh, don't you know the new maths? A normal person is like, fuck you talking about, man? What are you talking about, new maths? And you start to like question, what is he trying to say? You try and get into his head and think, how could this possibly make sense? And then you try and make excuses for him. No. Let me give you a little understanding about life that comes from playing role-playing games. See, me being the good guy that I am, playing Dungeons and Dragons with my brother and our friends, and at one point I was like, but if you think about it, we're always these adventures going on these dungeons, but like we just go there, kill everybody, take the gold and shit. I mean, if you were an orc, you're just sitting there minding your own business, eating some bones. Along comes a paladin and a crusader and whatever, and they just kill your ass and steal your shit. You'd be pretty pissed off. I mean, how can you sort of justify that sort of thing? And my brother just looked at me like, are you stupid? They're evil. You don't need to justify anything. They're evil. It says so right here. Chaotic evil. See? It's in the book. Chaotic evil. Evil. Fuck them. Kill them all. And I was like, that's a bit simplistic, is it? And now I'm like, yep, he was right. That's right. That's how life actually is. When somebody comes along and says, well, like the Morgul or whatever in Social Galactic, well, you have to be careful about what you believe, because when you make an error, like sedevacantism, and you have to be charitable, and I pray for you and I fast for you so that you might find. And I'm like, fuck off and die. You're a lying, deceiving, Freemasonic, satanic scumbag. I don't need your prayers because they're to Beelzebub. And I don't care about you, all your lies, at all. Well, we must find some middle ground between, violence against heretics and their lies and their murderous ways and charity. No, we don't. We really don't. All I'm doing now is trying to boost the numbers of people that actually know what Catholicism is, because that would be the most peaceful solution. But you know what? If war breaks out and it's like, hey, it's Catholics against the world, yeah, that's fine. If we're going to eventually take the papacy back by force at some point because war breaks out, I know which side I'm on. Your bro is awesome. He's got his moments. Hello, Sam. You might enjoy the anime Goblin Slayer. I think the last anime I looked at was, it was Ghost in a Shell, which is pretty old, and then Akira, I think. Oh, and then of course Lone Wolf and Cub. That was a pretty harsh series. That was little books. I don't know what happened to that. It's another one of those things that got fucking raped and destroyed or lost. I don't know. Why does that SG guy you're quoting sound like Bruce Charlton? Never read a man who was more of a charlatan. Oh, I'm so glad you agree. Bruce Charlton, I also tore him a new asshole on my blog, and because I commented on his, and then his comment was like, hey, I thought you could have a decent conversation with you, but you're a child. I'm like, hey Bruce, point out the errors in what I just fucking said about you and your theories and your complete Gnostic fucking nonsense. I mean, the guy says that I think the Mormons have it mostly right, but I'm not really a Mormon, but I think Mormonism is the closest thing. Really? Really? Fucking Mormonism? They literally had a guy in there called Moroni. You know why? Because only a moron can be a Mormon. Literally. Do you know what the Mormon religion is? Go look at that musical. Probably one of the only music. No, I went to see The Lion King at the theater in London, and the other one was this one. What's it called? The one about the Mormons, anyways. It's hilarious, and it's hilarious because it's true. Only a complete cretin would believe that this Joseph guy just wanders into the forest several times, fucks it all up, and then says, no, I found this golden leaves that are from angels, so I can fuck all your wives, and yeah, and only I can read them, and they're these golden leaves that come out of a tuba hat and can only be read with a special prism, but I'm the only one that can read it, and I'll read them out behind the screen, and then my friend here, Mr. Moroni, will just copy it onto a book, and then they'll make a book about it. And yeah, because Jesus was here in America, speaking broken English like we do, spelling color wrong and all that. It's the most retarded religion on earth. I mean, I don't know, how can you even believe that crap? It's amazing. Kurgan, the 2 copies of Believe I ordered arrived last week. They're Christmas gifts. Thank you. Well, thank you, sir. I appreciate the support. I really do. Yeah, I don't know. Bruce Charlton is a charlatan, and I don't know. You know, like I've often thought, like Vox. I like Vox. He's a nice guy, and whatever, you know. But in some ways, he's very naive. Like some of the people that he picks to be friends with, well, you know, including me. I mean, but the thing is, he's a very loyal guy, but he makes that error of loyalty, you know, which is like, look, you can be my best friend, you can be my mate for years and years, but if I find out you rape and kill kids, I'm gonna put a bullet in your fucking head, you know, and I'll do it myself because of loyalty. And if I can't put a bullet in your head, I'll make sure you get arrested, hung, drawn, and quartered, because fuck you. You know, justice is more important than loyalty. And it is. Because loyalty without justice is just a criminal, thuggish enterprise. So, and the fact that he, you know, takes a lot of these guys at their word, and I get it, you know, John Julius Norwich is an entertaining writer, so it's easy to be like drawn into it. Or Umberto Eco, you know, Vox loves Umberto Eco because he thinks, oh, he's an intellectual. Umberto Eco, to me, is boring because he is the typical Italian who wants to show how clever he is, what a clever boy he is. And can he turn a phrase? Well, maybe, but he packs it with so much really clever information that only I'm so clever to know that it makes it fucking boring to me. I mean, like, speak to the average Italian from Milan and you've gotten 20 Umberto Ecos. You know, you can find them on trees, really. So I'm not as impressed as he is by people's supposed aristocratic background or whatever. And John Julius Norwich is one of them. Rodney Stark, now there's a proper historian. And I think it's the measure of the man, you know. Perhaps it's a class thing, I don't know. I've rubbed shoulders with like presidents and billionaires and bushmen, and I tend to prefer the bushmen by quite a wide margin. But you know, I've never been very impressed with the so-called wealthy elite. They are kind of paper tigers, you know. Maybe they have a good education, maybe they know a bunch of things, maybe they can quote Herodotus, which I doubt in today's day and age. But okay, so you can quote Herodotus, great. I can't quote Herodotus, but I read him. I can't quote the Iliad, but I read it. You know, so it's like, And you know what? If we get in a bar fight, I can fight. How about you? Are you going to stand there with your, you know, PhD in English literature? Are you going to take a bottle to the face because I'm your buddy? Yeah. Or yeah, you're a wealthy trader and you got a Ferrari and 3 villas and, you know, fucking you go skiing in Aspen or whatever. Yeah, so what? That doesn't impress me. A man's word impresses me. A guy who's got something to lose and he stands his ground, that impresses me. Somebody who can't be bought, that impresses me. You know, these guys just, they're not something I find particularly entertaining. And Bruce Charlton, you know, you read his crap, and I was very impressed with one thing Bruce Charlton did. He wrote a little pamphlet, which is available free on the internet, online, called, you can read it online, it's called Addicted to Distraction. It was very good because it was written from a secular point of view, and at the end, the twist at the end is like, oh, and Satan is here. And it's like, fuck, you can't, you know, it's very well written, very well done. So, okay, so he's a smart guy, but he's completely wrong. And he's the typical spineless British person, British man, inverted commas, who just can't fucking put his balls on the block and just say what he means and mean what he says. He can't do that. Yeah, well, you know, but maybe this and maybe this that, and oh, we can't take this position. Everybody's wrong. There is no real good Christian thing. There is no real Christianity. We're all Christian. Nobody's a Christian. You know, it's fucking nonsense. Holy Ram says, how can anyone be persuaded to believe something like Mormonism or Islam? I don't mean those raised in it, but presumably full-grown adults. Exactly. Now, I feel for the little Muslim boy who gets beaten 2 hours a day if he doesn't quote the Quran, or, some poor Protestant kid who's like, and Jesus spoke just broken English like the rest of us, and he only drank the grape juice, Johnny, don't you say otherwise or I'll beat you with my belt. I feel sorry for those poor fuckers. What chance did they have in life, But a grown man, like me, right? I didn't believe in any Christianity whatsoever. Then I had this road to Damascus moment. I was like, oh shit. Well, all right. I had no dog in the fight whatsoever. In fact, in my earlier books, 2011, the Systema book, I'd sort of mentioned something along the lines of agnostic Christianity, sort of meaning, well, I know there's something because maths and logic, so I know the universe didn't just pop out of nothing for no reason like the atheists. I believed that from about age 7 to about age 14, 15. By 16, I was already agnostic. By 19, I was like, okay, there is something. But I never believed in the Christian God until this thing happened. And then I was like, okay, fuck it. It is the Christian. Okay, which Christian, right? And I mean, honestly, if I, on the evidence, if I came up that on the evidence being, a Seventh-day Adventist was the thing, then that's what I'd be. But on the evidence, you'd have to be absolutely fucking retarded to be a Protestant of any denomination. Absolutely moronic, completely can't read, can't write, can't think, can't do reason, no logic. Is just like cargo cultists. Oh, the Bible looks good, and it's only the one book. I only got to do the one book. Yeah, I'm Christian. Like, no, you're fucking retarded. So, really, a 10-year-old gets it. So you're left with what? The Copts, the Catholics, or the Orthodox? And I went through them. I don't know a fucking thing about the Copts. I met one. I met 2 taxi drivers in Egypt. I don't know anything about them. They're not within reach. And they're not that dissimilar to the Orthodox or anyway. And I look at the so-called Orthodox and, well, their shit just tumbles down. Because again, the Filioque. All right, let's check that out. It's a point of difference. Let's see. Filioque. So you guys believe the Holy Spirit proceeds only from the Father, and the Catholics believe it proceeds from the Father or the Son. Okay, well, let's read the Bible, hey? Oh, shit. Well, here it is. Okay, you guys are wrong. End of. What's the other thing? The Pope is not the supreme leader. Okay, well, let's go back to the patriarchs and let's see. Well, what happened? How long did we have popes for? We had popes for over 1,000 years. What did they say about the popes for over 1,000 years? They get to decide any dispute. Any dispute that happens, the Pope makes the final decision. That happened for 1,000 years. Then all of a sudden, no, we never agreed to that. Bullshit. And who is it that doesn't agree to that? These backstabbing fuckers who can ask for help and then stab you in the back and try and kill you, literally, by the thousands. They're the good guys. Don't think so. It really is not fucking hard. The only Christianity is Catholicism. And let me be clear that when I say Catholicism, I absolutely do not include the Novus Ordo. They are absolute Satanistic scum. From 1958 on, there has been no valid pope. The only Christians left on earth are sedevacantist Catholics. Catholics that know that there's been no valid pope since the 9th of October of 1958, when the last valid pope, Pius XII, died. We're the only Christians left. Everybody else is fucking LARPing at it. And if you think that Protestantism is Christianity, then you're saying, that's like, that's the analogy, just came back to me. It's like saying that the current day pagans, who are live action role-playing, LARPing, at being pagan Vikings, like those guys represent the actual Vikings. Are you fucking kidding me? Read a book. Read a book. Yeah? The actual Vikings had nothing to do with the LARPers that are going around saying, I believe in Odin. No, you fucking don't. You're a cosplayer. Yeah? And one of those Vikings, one of the original Vikings, who came here and saw these LARPers play, he would kill all of them on sight just for blasphemy of their gods, and then burn them after he ate their semen, because that's kind of what they did. Go read my blog. Go read my blog. Anthony says, Kurgan, I really enjoyed your blog post calling out Carl Denninger and his boomer blackpilling. I plan on being one of those people whose DNA survives, unlike the rest of my normie family and friends. Good man! The more I think about that, actually, and the more important that becomes, Anthony, thanks for bringing that up. I was having this conversation with my wife of late, because, you know, we've got 5 kids between us. She had 1 from a previous thing, I got 1 from a previous thing, and we've got 3 between us. You know, in 6 years, we've made 3 kids. Not bad going. And, you know, the thing is, like, the people are like, oh, you got 5 kids. You know, everybody that finds out is like, oh my God. You know, in Italy, they're still like, congratulations. You know, kids are like, that's a hard thing to do. But in the West, sort of, in the Anglo-Saxon sort of world, they're like, hey, 5 kids, hey. What's your carbon footprint like? You know, they don't dare say that to my face, because even though I've got these gay-looking red glasses, because the other ones that I've crushed and I've reordered, and Italian Poste says, oh, we tried to deliver it at 6:20 in the morning. No, you didn't. You fucking liars. So I don't know what those ones get. But despite these gay-looking glasses, I still look the way I do. I'm still 6'2", and I get a little glint in my eye when somebody starts trying to say shit like that. So they don't to my face, but you can see that they're thinking, oh, 5 kilos, you know, oh. And I'm like, you fucking wuss. You know, people like now, if we were to like announce, hey, we're having a 6th kid or a 7th kid or whatever, people would be like, oh my God, what are you doing? You know, you don't know how you're going to feed them all. And you're like, wait, since when did it become a thing that if you have another kid, that's a bad thing? Now, as I said before, I lived in Africa for 25 years. Those people go fuck all, right? Sometimes they don't have enough to eat for themselves. But when they get pregnant, they're like, hey, the whole village is like, cool, you got another baby coming. Hey, let's help, you know? It's a cool time. And I mentioned that to my wife. I was like, when the fuck did it become like okay to kill kids because they're inconvenient, which is what abortion is? And it's like, wait, what? Oh, it's the boomers. That's right. It's the boomers that did it. And who else? Protestantism. Because Protestantism allowed contraception. Contraception means, oh, you're having sex without trying to make kids. So, well, do we really need to like get married in order to have sex? Oh, no, let's not do that. And then, oh, we do have sex anyways, and we don't really like the condoms, and hey, shit, we can have abortion. Just kill the kid, you know. That's where it comes from. Up until not too long ago, you had sex to make kids. Or you had sex because you had fun. And kids came along as a result of it. Lots of them. 10, 12 kids, normal. 15 kids, normal. Nothing wrong with it. And everybody was happy. Because kids are a blessing. Is it hard to feed them all? Sure. Guess what? They did it 300, 400, 500 years ago. They did it. They fed all 15 kids. They didn't have tractors. Didn't have electricity. They often didn't have indoor plumbing. Work your ass off, boys. Get that shovel and start digging that ground and planting those crops, hunting those animals, farming those pigs or chickens or whatever. Yeah? Why the fuck shouldn't you have 12 kids? Why not? You know, I started a bit late because thinking about it, I mean, until I was in my late 30s, at least late 30s, I bought into the boomer thing. I was like, fuck, the world sucks. People are assholes. They're all fucking stupid and lying, thieving, conniving fuckheads. Why would I want to bring kids into this? Shit, man, they're going to suffer. And I'm like, you know, it took me decades to get rid of the brainwashing. You know, it started out with the brainwashing of the erroneous loyalty because I was raised in a almost samurai type family because, believe it or not, the old noble European families had a sense of honor that was not very far at all from the samurai thing. You know, the Romans used to kill themselves if they lost the battle, same like the samurais. Their word was their bond, and that's it. And that still was the case in my family. Plus, they trained a Japanese guy. My dad was like, you know, third Dan by the time I was born. So that was instilled in me. And it's very hard to get rid of this, like, erroneous loyalty. don't get me wrong, loyalty is a virtue, but loyalty needs to be earned. Same like respect. I don't give you respect just because you're an old man. I'll give you some respect just because you're an old man. You know, I'm not gonna like push in front of you or like, you know, swear at you or whatever. But like I always tell my daughter, don't trust old people. They're usually assholes that just lived long enough to get old, you know? Not all of them, but you know, it's just because you're old doesn't mean you're a nice guy. I'll give you the benefit of doubt until you prove it wrong, you know? But people are people. So first I had to get rid of that, and then it was like, but wait, life has always been tough. Life always been hard. And in today's day and age, really, we got it fucking easy. You think it was easier 300 years ago? Really? Look, I'm trying to be a farmer, and I'm like, fuck, this is really hard work, man. It's tough. Oh, I'm going to be off grid. No, you're fucking not, unless you really know what you're doing and planned it and have got quite a lot of money to do that, you know, to get there. It's tough shit. But people did it for hundreds of years, for millennia, in fact. But we can't. I can't. You can't. Why not? Now, it's true that they've brainwashed the population to the point where it's hard to find a woman that will allow herself to be led that way. But you know, the thing is, once the wool gets removed from your eyes, once you start to see the lies, once you start to see the bullshit, they can't get it back. You can't unsee it. Once you see the fucking little guy behind the curtain, hunched over with a little hat and, you know, maybe a big nose or whatever, and you can't unsee that. Wizard of Oz is out. Now you've seen him. Oh, now you know the truth, and you can't forget that. Woolly Ram, a man that can fix a leaky sink is impressive. If he can quote Herodotus, that's a bonus. Dude, a leaky sink is nothing. Try to build a gasifier. By the way, on the gasifier, I've got some news coming up, which I'll post to the people that supported me, whatever. But you know, fixing a leaky sink is really not that difficult. There's a lot more fucking hard shit going on. Like, never mind. There's a lot of little projects that I've had to do since I came here, and I've learned how to use like a welding machine enough that I can weld some shit. You know, I'm nowhere near good. I'm not good at all, but I can at least weld something. And I had to learn how to, you know, like, I mean, I knew all about weapons and guns and knives and how to make shit like that, so I knew that before. But you know, farming and how to prune trees and cut wood and how to store the wood. And let me tell you, you really do need to dry that wood, because the wood that I stored like last year or beginning of this year that I'm burning now, it burns clean. It's such a big difference that it makes to the stove from when I, you know, the first year I was here, that like everything was late. We got here, I was burning like wet wood and stuff, you know. So, and then the thing is, when you work a farm, you start to get into a rhythm. You start to see the natural order of things. The guy with the bees, I let him put bees on my land, and you know, he gives me some honey. Got 18 jars of honey, which probably lasts us the whole year, really. He gave us 6 the first year, then 12, then 18, you know. So he's like, I leave him alone. I help him when I can help him. I don't ask for anything. And like I can see, he's like, this guy's cool. He's not like the last guy. So every year he gives me more, you know. He like, and that's the kind of relationship I want with people. You know, it's really quite cool. Murg Maxis says the way Charlton mocks or puts down anyone who pushes something that disagrees with him with the line "Satan is laughing" makes me think he's a reluctant Satanist. He is. Whether he knows it or not, that's what he's pushing. He's pushing for anything that's not actual Christianity. And he's not stupid, so what's the purpose of doing that? Now, I've got my opinion. It's just my opinion. I don't know. I believe Bruce Charlton is the typical weak-willed, spineless, cowardly Englishman. And as a result of that, he has to tear everybody down, because otherwise he has to face the fact that he's a cowardly, spineless Englishman. And there's a lot of people like that. He's a typical gamma who thinks, I'm smart. I've got a blog. A lot of people read my shit. So what I say is smarter than what you say. And I say, well, you can't be a crusader because then I would have to pick up, you'd have to pick up a sword and fight or whatever, or have an opinion or stand his ground, and it's just fucking pathetic. Oh, and Merck says, God bless the family who has 12 kids. Dude, I know of at least 3 young couples that got married recently, partly as a result of my work, of reading my book, Believe, and so on. They're in their 20s, married to awesome women. I fully expect them to have functioning football teams before I drop dead. And they're pretty much all for it. The one guy, he might be listening as well, I don't know. The one guy, he was like, dude, I'm planning to have 12 kids. And the other friend is I'm sure he's gonna announce that they're having a child soon. And the third couple also, I'm expecting them to announce soon, and he might also be on here, I don't know. So Merg Megalomaxis says, actual Vikings would think those LARPers are trolls or illusions made by Loki that need to be dealt with. Yeah, pretty much. Willie Ram says, real honey is so different from store-bought honey. Yeah, it is. And another thing I'm doing, because they're putting that mRNA stuff in pretty much everything, food too, I think soon. I'm getting away from like using any kind of medicine. So I had like another bout of flu or whatever coming on, and I was like, fuck it, and I hardly ever took any drugs, but I did believe in ibuprofen. And as of late, also a little bit of what we call tachipirina here, which is the, what's the English word for that? The common sort of analgesic. There's ibuprofen, and then there's the other one. But that other one never worked for me. Never really does anything for me. But ibuprofen did, throughout. It's an anti-inflammatory, but it also takes out fever sort of stuff. And fever is kind of my kryptonite. As soon as I get a bit of fever, I'm out of it. I'm like, as I got older, I must have gotten more resilient, because my fever actually went up to 39. And before that in my life, I had paracetamol. Thank you, Willie Ram. Paracetamol never did jack to me, but lately, over the last 2 years or so, I've had to use it now and then, and it did something. But I thought, fuck it, I don't need to use any of this shit. All the stuff was originally from plants, and so I've done a tincture using olive leaves, and I've done like a sort of olive tree leaf infusion, which also sort of helped. But the thing that I found worked the best was just honey and lemon. Not even with a shot of alcohol, just honey and lemon. As soon as I started to get a bit of, tickly throat and coughing and spitting up some stuff, honey and lemon, and it's just like, and it's proper honey, real honey from actual bees, and, lemon, proper lemon. Works. Just fixed everything really quick. And sometimes some alcohol, like, a little bit of wine, like, but when I say a little bit of alcohol, beer is actually not good for me. It doesn't agree with my stomach and so on. But I like the taste now and then. But, like when I say a bit of wine, like, say like that, a finger or 2 fingers of like, I don't drink much red wine because the tannins hurt my liver. I've got a Gilbert's disease, it's a genetic disorder that like messes up my liver a bit if I drink tannins. Aspirin works well for me generally. A hot shower and going to bed early does wonders. Yep, hot shower, bed, lemon, and honey. And if you excuse me, I need to go and get rid of that beer. Tell you what, you guys think up of some things to ask, put them in the chat. If when I come back you've got some, I'll carry on. If not, I'll say goodnight. But go ahead and say any topic, any questions. And I'm back. Alright, let's see. Woolly Ram. Woolly Ram says, had a thought for a while, for free choice to be possible, we must have an eternal soul. Does that make sense? Yes, it does. Perfect sense, actually. Very good. Very good logical point. Sam Webbs, have you identified an affordable 1903 pocket MLS over there yet? Yes, there's one that's available for about 280 euro, but I've only got my 100 here. 50 from you guys and 50 that I matched. I can't do more than match what you guys send me through the super chats because, like I said, I've got a lot of expenses. I've got 5 kids. I can't really justify buying another gun. I mean, I want one, and that's justification enough. But, you know, there's a lot of stuff I need to get for the house, for the farm, and so on. I'm also trying to, like, make the house a bit more livable. I've actually done the floor of the bathroom, which was a little bit of a surprise for the wife. I'm doing something else. She's got like this like dressing, what do you call it? You know, like a desk where you like women keep their crap and do their makeup and whatever. And I got this from my friend Alfredo, who passed away. From his place, there was this mirror that had like the 3 little holes for like the light bulbs, like a, you know, like a 1920s sort of like actress type mirror. You know, it's a bit old, and sort of the frame of it was a metal frame. So but I asked his son, and you know, his son said, "Look, just take whatever you want." I'm like, dude, can I take that mirror? Is that like they like wrecked all the stuff, and you know, the mirror was just lying there in the dirt for like weeks. So can I take that? And he goes, take whatever you want. You can take it whatever you want. So I took that mirror and I've repainted the frame of like, you know, I found the light bulbs that will fit in those little holes, but I need to build the backing for it, and I need to build like a frame, like a nice frame to go with it, because the bottom of the mirror is like, you know, when mirrors are really old and they get the little black bit, so I need to just cover that with a nice frame. But I've got a piece of wood that I've like sanded down. It's going to be a bit of a thing. So yeah, look, you know, if I had $2,000 to spend on a gun, I'd get a full size 1911, like one of the ones that I really like. Sometimes some people here don't know what that stuff's worth, but yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's an achievable goal. You know, help a poor man get a 1911. I can actually pick up a decent 1911 for about $1,000 here. So again, that's the goal I'd like to reach, but I can only go by the kindness of strangers. Getting back to Woolly Ram's thought, yes, in order to have free choice, you must have an eternal soul, because if you didn't, then what's the point, right? You're just some kind of accident then of chance, which we know mathematically doesn't work out. You know, when I say this, I did a video, I can't remember, I think it's in the 30s, 36, 37, something like that, about the atheist kill shot, which is like, you know, that saying, well, if you have 1 million monkeys typing on 1 million typewriters for 1 million years, you'll get the works of Shakespeare. No, you won't. If you do the maths, you won't even get the first sentence out of one of Shakespeare's plays. And that's not with 1 million monkeys, that's with billions of monkeys on billions of planets in billions of galaxies. You put them all together and it would take you longer to type out just the one sentence in one of his plays than the 15 billion years that have been going on for, you know, supposedly the 15 billion years that's happened since the Big Bang. There just isn't enough time for any of this. And that's just the works of Shakespeare. Now, if you think that the works of Shakespeare is like a long shot to happen by chance, there are universal constants that we are subjected to, without which the universe wouldn't exist, life wouldn't exist, that are far, 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 far less likely than a monkey randomly typing out the entire works of Shakespeare by chance. So, oh, that's a very good question. Willie Ram says, could you expand on how women's emphasis on aesthetics complements men's fixation on functionality? I'm assuming you mean that with respect to inanimate objects rather than procreation, because procreation, it's a little bit the other way around. The men are, attracted by the looks of a woman, while a woman is mostly attracted by the practical ability of a man to look after her, take care of her, and so on. And especially in the modern day now, women too are, want their eye candy, but biologically speaking, women are not as interested in that as men are. When it comes to the aesthetics, women are physically weaker, and women make themselves beautiful in order to attract the man. In order to make themselves beautiful, they also try and beautify their surroundings. And a woman does make surroundings more pleasant, generally speaking, because, again, once a man focuses on something, generally speaking, he's going to be better at it than a woman. So if he focuses on cooking, all the famous chefs are men. If he focuses on interior decorating, it's not a very manly thing, but a man that has got an eye for detail generally will outdo a woman, because women's instinct on this sort of thing is very superficial. What a woman is better at doing, for example, is those little touches, those finishing touches that, she'll, like my wife, went out and bought these little things to hang on the wall in the downstairs bathroom. They change the character of the thing. They give it a little, sprig of life sort of thing. Well, I'm more like, well, if we paint that white, it's going to look better than if we paint it another color. And she's sort of like, oh, but why is it so boring? Couldn't we have pea green or something? I'm like, dude, do I have to really paint the whole fucking room to show you that that doesn't really work, And, the thing is, she still doesn't believe me until it happens, and then when it happens, she's like, "Oh yeah, you were kind of right, actually," because I did the bathroom upstairs was a fucking mess. It was one of the first rooms I tackled, which gets into Sandblast Gate. We don't talk about Sandblast Gate in this house. We just don't mention it at all. But yeah. Anyway, after Sandblast Gate, which shall never be mentioned of again, I repainted the bathroom, and but it had the splashback of where the sink was absolutely abhorrent. It was like these thick tiles, about that thick, with grouting at the back, and there were broken tiles that then had been painted in with a felted pen, like a permanent mark. It was just fucking horrific, and it was doing my head in the whole time. And the floor was bare concrete, which when I painted and stuff, all the paint dropped on it, so it was splotchy bare concrete, except where you've got yellow mosaic, which is all yellow, just yellow, crappy, slightly diarrhea looking yellow, yellowish, shitty mosaic on the wall, halfway up the wall. And because originally the whole thing, of course, was painted grey, because that was the color, including the beams. So we painted the ceiling white, did the beams, in wood, the original wood color, and but then the splashback, I was like, no. So my wife was away for a bit. I knocked out all the tiles, and I put in there a green, a glass that was painted green at the back, sort of a aquamarine, not really green, with a wooden sort of border to it. And I thought, man, I was pretty proud of it, considering that where the where the spout comes out is some horrific handmade job with, like, you know, it looks crap, but I still managed to cover it up, put the glass around it somehow, you know, like make it look sort of decent. Um, was he a smoker? Yellow Mosaic was the former owner a smoker? I'm sure he did a lot of drugs. I'm just assuming he did a lot of drugs. But and then the floor I redid in this. Finally, I did it in like this oak looking material and sealed it all around. It actually looks quite decent. And then I painted above the yellow mosaic, which you can't do much about. I painted the inside of the shower, just the inside of the shower, the same sort of aquamarine color as the splashback. So it's sort of, and changed the shower curtain, whatever. And like when she came in, she was like, "Oh yeah, this is cool, this works." And I was like, "Do you remember 2 years ago when we moved here? I told you, you know, this is probably a cool color theme. It's sort of, I don't like the yellow either, but it kind of goes with it." And you were like, "Oh no, that's horrible." And it's like, you know, but yeah, can't do anything about it, sort of thing. So my opinion about that is that women will prettify things because that's how they get their enjoyment. They're used to doing that with themselves, with their own bodies, and you know, they're solipsistic. So, oh, making me pretty, I need to be in a pretty environment and to be even prettier, you know, and it makes sense. While a man, it's sort of like, yeah, we need the gun to be able to shoot the bullets. Don't really care what it looks like because I need to kill the enemy and eat. So, yeah, if I got time and energy after, you know, we've got really a lot of food and gold and there's no enemies, okay, then I'll make my rifle look a bit prettier too, you know. That's kind of the male attitude, tends to be along those lines. And you know, there can be a lot of conflict in that sort of thing because, you know, it's actually really funny. I've been giving this dynamic a lot of thought lately, which is and I'm really enjoying it. Actually, I'm really enjoying the exploration of it with my wife. About you know, I think I'm very male. I'm a very male, and she's a very female. You know, she's very feminine. Her emotions are very strong, and you know, sometimes that kind of like hormonal flipping emotions are like, you know, they can be absolutely irritating and they can be absolutely impossible to deal with, and you know, wants you to leads you to like want to tell her to just shut the fuck up and fuck off. But and by the same token, my sometimes brutish manner makes her want to say, you know, just fuck off and die, you know, or poison my coffee or whatever, my tea rather. But the thing is, because if I don't keep in mind that, you know, she's a woman and that's what they're like, and then I start to treat her a little bit like a man, then it goes wrong really quick, because it's just like, what are you doing? You know, forget about it. It's not the way. And the thing is, the more I keep to my mind that no, she's a woman, and you know, you have to really deal with her on that basis, you know, the more she treats me in a way that suits me too, because then she becomes even more feminine, and so her natural femininity comes out even more. And I really like that, you know, and it's really, she knows how to talk to me, she knows how to like get me when I'm pissed off or something upsets me, she knows exactly how to like make it better, and I know to do that for her too, when you're in sync, which by the way was not that difficult 200 years ago. But we've been brainwashed with so much bullshit about like equality and this and that, and oh, you know, female brains are just as good as male brains and they work the same. No, they fucking don't. They don't work the same. They're structurally, physically different. There are different structures in the male brain from the female brain. They've got different proportions of gray matter and white matter. You know, corpus callosum in a woman is much bigger than a man, and the cognitive power, the so-called gray matter, is there's more of it in the man's brain. There's actual physical differences in the human brain between men and women. You think that doesn't reflect? Of course it reflects. The hormones are different. You know, they've got estrogen, we've got testosterone. It has all sorts of different things that make happen in your body. The functions of our bodies are different. You think that doesn't play into it? Of course it plays into it. And we've been lied to so badly that we're not being natural men and natural women anymore. It's difficult to go back there. Now, I grew up pretty wild, and in our own way, so did she, but we got lied to from birth, like everybody. And, you know, it's really funny because my wife's actually she's a very tough woman. She's a very courageous woman in many, 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 many ways. But her best ability, you know, her when she's most courageous, when she's most tough, when she's most like unbelievable, is when she does things as a woman from a female perspective. And she'll do things and get through stuff that I'm like, fucking hell, that's fucking impressive. Which if she tried, you know, when she did, or she tried to get through that stuff, you know, in more of a male way, it just rings wrong, it turns out wrong, it doesn't feel good for anybody around, you know, it's just not right. But that's the British feminist sort of thing, is kind of tries to inculcate that in every woman's head, you know, and it's bullshit. It's fucking wrong. It's not, it doesn't make her happy or any other woman in England happy, by the way. And, you know, similarly, if I am trying to be fakely, you know, soft or merciful or charitable in some, you know, plastic way, which is like, hey, I shouldn't say what I'm thinking because that could be offensive. It's all bullshit. It fucking eats me up inside. It doesn't work well, and then comes out strong. No. So I just say what I need to say, and it's like, and after, you know, we've now been together enough that she kind of gets it, which is like, okay, just because he said that, and I'm also smart enough now to sort of say, look, you know, this thing is just fucking wrong. That's a mistake, and this should be done this way. It should be done this way. But I'm not calling you a fucking idiot because maybe this thing didn't get done right or whatever. And I'm not saying you're fucking wrong. I'm just saying, look, this is why I'm thinking about this way and that way and that way. Do you see where I'm coming from? And she's now learned enough about me that, you know, when I say something like that, I genuinely am not having a go at anybody. I'm not like saying, oh, you're a fucking moron. You know, like even with my friends or what, you know, with guys, it's easier because like it's working. You know, my friend was cutting something with a chainsaw and like something bounced and like fucking gave him a little scratch on his head. I'm like, ha, you dick. And you didn't want the glasses that I told you, huh? Next time you'll go blind, you fucker. And we laugh about it, right? You do that with a woman and she's like, oh, well, I just didn't want to waste more time. You know, not that the woman would be using a chainsaw, but I'm saying, you know, the equivalent would be like, hey, stop teasing me. Why are you laughing at me? You know, I'm really hurt and now I'm offended. You know, it's be like, ugh. So if a woman was using a chainsaw and she gets something bouncing, you'd have to go like, oh, darling, please stop. Let's switch off the chainsaw and let's get your safety glasses on as I suggested before. I know you were just trying to get ahead and do the job quickly, but, you know, safety first. And that's how you'd approach it with a woman, right? And then she's happy because, you know, he cares about me. Now, do I care less about my male friend? No. It's just like we're guys. It's like, you fucking idiot. Why'd you do it that stupid, wrong fucking way? But now if you say that to a woman, she'll get pissed off and angry, and you're like, you don't mean it that way. You know, you're not trying to be mean to her. You're just saying, you know, it's a fuck up. You know it's a fuck up. I know it's a fuck up. Let's laugh about it. But they get really upset about it. So, you know, that kind of communication is really, really important because it plays out in so many different ways. It plays out with our kids, how we raise them. It plays out with how we work. It plays out in the stupidest thing, even in like, you know, whatever, making dinner and setting the table or like getting the kids to like set the table. And there's so, I don't know, it's such an interesting dynamic. And I'm like, I'm really so glad that she is so feminine in such a smart way because it complements me really well. It's I don't know. It really is fascinating. It's like, and I don't think a lot of people understand that dynamic. I think a lot of people just tolerate each other and like just kind of make do, and they like put up with shit that is not really natural for them to put up with or to have to deal with, because you know the women are putting up with stuff they shouldn't have to and the men are putting up with stuff they shouldn't have to. And it's like, if you just realized how important the male-female dynamic is, with the male being the male and the female being the female, and being, you know, the problem is that like in the modern world, a man that's just going to be a man is like going to be considered some brutish pig, and a woman that's just trying to be a woman is going to be considered some weird, crazy, insane fucking space jockey that's absolutely unreliable. And neither thing is true, you know. If you actually figure it out, the interplay is awesome. Willie Ram says, autistic interlude. There is a mathematical constant determined by an 18th century, I think, zookeeper of the relation between various inner organs. Oh. I'd be very interested in finding out what that is. In short, the more stuff you have inside, the less biological budget there is for your nervous system / brain. Well, I don't know about that, because then that would make bugs pretty fucking smart. Having a cloning facility in your lower abdomen has a price. Okay. Who's got a cloning facility in the lower abdomen? Insects? Butterfly? I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if I agree with that theory. I'd have to know more about it. I'm ignorant of it, so. But anyway, I've been going for over 2 hours. Okay, and I need to get up early tomorrow, actually, so yeah. Well, guys, it's been a fun talk or rant, or whatever way you want to call it. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate all the very intelligent and cool questions you guys send. I keep promising that I'm gonna try and do the stream more regularly, but I really should do that. So send me some topics to give me a little inspirational help. Although I'm never really out of topics. It's just I don't want to keep doing stuff that only interests me. You know, you guys are here pretty much every time I speak. So if you got something you want to talk about, let me know. Maybe we do a call-in show, like where you guys pop up as well. And thank you very much. God bless every single one of you. Remember, the Fourth Crusade was absolutely warranted, and in fact, they should have done it in the First Crusade. Tell all your friends that are Orthodox and or Protestant. Thank you very much, and have a good night.